Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and welcome to your weekly astrology forecast for the week of November 16th through November the 22nd. This week, we'll be talking about Venus making a square to both Jupiter and Saturn over the course of the week. Mercury will be making an opposition to Uranus from the sign of Scorpio to the sign of Taurus. We have a couple planetary ingresses this week with Venus moving into her exile in the sign of Scorpio after hanging out in one of her domiciles in Libra, and the Sun will be moving into Sagittarius this week. So we've got some shifting sands underneath our feet, and then we'll be experiencing the waxing moon into the first quarter phase. So lots of changes afoot. We'll try to break it all down for you as we move forward this week. I hope that you're all doing well out there. Let's take a look at the planetary condition report. Share my screen here. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a lower key week, I guess, at least for me, than the last week when I guess everybody was in the tension of the election. And now that Mercury Saturn square has separated, um, we're getting at least some relief, I think, from that. And we may see some of that energy returning with Venus squaring both Jupiter and Saturn this week. So maybe relationships or partnerships or the way that we're trying to create harmony may be leaving us in a little bit of a state of limbo, or maybe a little bit difficult to come to completion. But again, the planets continue to spin, so we will be able to eventually move forward from that. But let's break down the planetary condition report and see what's happening in the sky, and we'll get to the details here. All right, so the Sun this week is starting out in the temple of Mars in Scorpio, moving from 24 to 30 degrees of Scorpio. It is peregrine in those final degrees. It is fast in motion. It will make an exact square with the moon on the 21st, which is what we call our first quarter moon. And it will conjoin the fixed star Toliman at 29 degrees of Scorpio on the 21st. No, that happens on the 20th, and then it moves into Sagittarius on the 21st. Pardon me. It will be in the terms of Saturn from 24 to 30 degrees, co-present with Mercury in Scorpio, and sextiling both Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn. Its host is a newly direct Mars in Aries, and there is an aversion relationship to that. It is in aversion to its host, but it does have some connection by like ingirding, which is a concept that means that that planet is in a sign that it also rules, or it rules two particular domiciles. So Mars is in one of its own domiciles, hence it is able to provide resources through maybe like a back channel to Scorpio. So that's what's going on with the Sun and Scorpio. We're finishing off this Scorpio season where we're being asked to let go of old things, old illusions, old habits, old forms, to get our compost energy on. We just started a new moon in the third decan of Scorpio. I'm actually recording this on Friday, November the 13th in the early afternoon. But by the time you should be listening to this, we'll have a new moon on Sunday over the weekend. And this forecast will be for the waxing moon phase after that new moon. So that new moon is all about letting go of old habits, old forms. It was associated with opportunity, kairos, and mostly though about accepting that some opportunities have passed. The old adage goes that uh, kairos was this diamond that had a lock of hair in the front of its head, on its forehead, and you can only grab it from the front when it is coming towards you. If it has already passed, not even Zeus himself can corral kairos. So it's about coming to terms with the dreams that we may not have been able to capture. And I think at the beginning of this week, Monday through Saturday, we're going to be coming to terms and shedding the old skin, like the snake, and allowing ourselves the flexibility to be able to breathe again. And hope will return when we move to the Sun in Sagittarius. We hopefully will be able to find a new goal that we might be able to put our energies towards, and a new enthusiasm. And we'll talk about that because Sagittarius 1 is all about kind of speeding towards a goal and having an enthusiasm that is contagious. There are definitely uh, some themes of being able to spread your optimism in that particular situation. So let's talk about the sun in Sagittarius. It will only peak into the first degree or so, from 0 to 1 degree. Sun will still be moving fast in that position. It does gain triplicity. The sun will gain triplicity as the elemental ruler of the fire signs in the day. It will also be in the terms of Jupiter from 0 to 12 degrees. So an improvement on the condition of the sun. It will become a triplicity ruler where it will have some of that communal support, where it might be easier to find a group or your community that supports you, and that it will be in the terms of a benefic bound lord, which says, hey, the rules that you have to follow now are being able to say yes to things, be able to confirm and stabilize things around you, and have an awareness of how you want to promote growth. So that is an improvement, because when we start off the week, we're going to start off in terms of Saturn, which is about consolidating, letting things go, having the old forms pass away. So, most of this week, we will be experiencing the letting go before we can move forward again. When the sun moves into Sagittarius, it will be the only aspect it's making by whole sign you can see here is a trine to Mars. So, this is where we are really going to be feeling the desire to move forward with our lives after a period of letting go. And Mars is going to help facilitate that too, and that desire to really say, I'm ready. I'm ready to move forward. The host of the sun when it moves into Sagittarius will be Jupiter in Capricorn, a fallen Jupiter in Capricorn, where it is in aversion to that host. Now, that is the only problem we have with this sun. Its host is not in very good shape. It could even be considered potentially a functional malefic. Sometimes I've heard certain authors, and Robert Schmidt talks about this too, is a benefic planet that is in like its fall or something like that could act as a functional malefic. So we have to be careful of that with our Jupiter here in Capricorn. So we may want to move forward with our plans, with our goals, but it may be a little bit we may be finding that we have a lack of resources. We have, because of Jupiter's kind of depressed position right now. We might not really be ready to move forward towards that goal, but I think it is a good time to plan. It's a good time to figure out what it is you really want to move forward towards. And is that goal really being fueled by your higher self, by your good daimon, or is it being fueled by a desire for material security or something of that nature, or some kind of material status with Jupiter in Capricorn in that third decan, where we're trying to establish our authority rather than maybe, be a channel for divine wisdom. So we have to be careful of that. That's kind of like I would consider this. Are you moving towards your goal for reasons of purity, or are you selling out towards the goal? I think it may be a question to ask yourself this week. All right, let's talk about Saturn. Saturn is in the sign of Capricorn at 27 degrees of Capricorn this week. It is moving fast, but it'll only be moving through that 20 or 28th degree, you could consider it. It's in its own domicile. It'll make an exact sextile to the sun the same day that it squares Venus, which is the 19th. That is Thursday the 19th. It will be in the terms of Mars from 26 to 30 degrees. And it's making a number of aspects. It'll be co-present with Jupiter and Capricorn. It will be making an overcoming square to Mars. So again, we want to move forward, but Saturn is still slowing us down and helping us to consider the ramifications of our actions, and potentially putting some roadblocks in our place. But those roadblocks are the roadblocks that are of maturity, I think. As sometimes we, in our youth, we want to take an action that is impetuous, where we just want what we want when we want it. And that's not always in our best interest, even though it may come from a place of desire. sometimes we have to slow down and really consider the ramifications of our actions on other people. And that's what Saturn is doing with Mars right now and saying, you know what, slow down, consider what you're doing or what you're desiring is going to affect others and your community and your world. And then you'll be able to move forward from a place of wisdom rather than a place of just um, impetuous youth. All right. Saturn will also be sextiling the Sun and Mercury in Scorpio, and then it will be squaring Venus in Libra and moving into a trine relationship with Venus when Venus moves into Scorpio. So we will have an exact square from Saturn to Venus. So we'll have a build-up phase for a couple days during the week, and that tension will start to relieve around Thursday. So we may feel like we're trying to expand some of the partnerships that we're working within or the harmonization between us and other people. And we may run into a few challenges, a few roadblocks, a few limitations of circumstance. Um, Sometimes we have to reconsider the terms of a deal, and that may be something we're experiencing with Venus squaring Saturn. Also, is that we've got to read the fine print before we sign on to our partnerships, and then we might be able to move forward again once it passes through that that square relationship. Okay. Saturn is its own host this week, so it is able to draw upon all its own resources. Those resources are the quality of time, being compelled to move towards something, like being bound towards something, but also the qualities of consolidating things and compressing things, making things more like, I guess you could consider making them smaller too, like crushing something into a ball. Okay. All right, let's talk about Jupiter. Jupiter is moving through Capricorn as well from 23 to 24 degrees of Capricorn. It is fast in motion. It will continue to be in its fall or its depression, where it is in a home, a house, a temple, a place where it is not comfortable. Been listening to more of those Schmidt lectures and kind of trying to understand the way that he sees the astrological system and the way that he views the astrological world. And one of the things he was talking about was places and signs where planets kind of they contribute, they take on some of the qualities of that particular house when they move into it. And some houses have qualities that are like planets, okay? So, like, for example, the Capricorn house is like Saturn, where it is consolidating, and we may slow things down. We may have to think about the quality of time, and this is something that Jupiter doesn't necessarily like doing. Jupiter wants to confirm things, it wants to stabilize things. In a modern sense, it wants to expand and say yes, where Saturn is the quality of no. Saturn says no, Saturn says slow down. So when Jupiter is in this temple, it is taking on some of those Saturnian qualities of saying, well, if I want to grow and I want to stabilize and I want to say yes to things, I have to go through a series of no's, and I have to go through a series of really considering uh, the ramifications of time. And Jupiter wants to just create abundance and say, "Here, have it all, have the cornucopia." And Saturn says, "Well, maybe you've spent a little bit too much. Maybe you need to really, pare the budget down," type of thing. So this is something where some of the advice I've been giving as Jupiter has been moving through Capricorn was take a look at your actual budget. Can you actually afford to do the things that you want to do? At the beginning of Jupiter in Capricorn, I slashed my budget significantly and slashed some expenses that were just, most of it was bloat that I didn't really need. And I think that's the proper way to use Jupiter in Capricorn. You can find resources by uh, consolidating. So, like, for example, and I talked about this many months ago, but I had a phone company that was, my phone bill was really expensive, and I really didn't need all the services that it was providing or the minutes or all of these things, and I completely got rid of it and got a much more bare bones phone company as my provider, and it saved me almost, I would say, almost $150 a month, which is, I found resources by cutting something and by consolidating and by getting rid of something. So that may be one thing to consider as we're moving through these final degrees of Capricorn with Jupiter before it moves into Aquarius, which again is still Saturnian. So the vibe is not going to shift that much. It's just going to be a slightly different set of circumstances, a more diurnal form of Saturn, where we're considering consolidating more on a social level rather than on a personal and inner level. All right, let's move on to Mars. Um, well, let me first of all, I didn't finish off some of the details on Jupiter. It will be making a square to Venus on the 16th. It's in the terms of Saturn from 22 to 26 degrees. It's co-present with its host Saturn. It is making its own overcoming square to Mars in Aries. It is receiving a square from Venus in Libra, and then will be moving into a sextile relationship with Venus in Scorpio. And it will continue to sextile the Sun and Mercury in Scorpio. So let's move forward to Mars. Mars is newly direct. It is in the temple of Aries, one of its own temples. So it is in a place that is like it. So yes, Mars is said to rule Aries, but this is a place where Mars has it is very much able to do what it wants to do. And in this case, it is a severing, separating, courageous kind of quality that will allow us to separate from the things that are preventing us from crafting an individual identity from the collective. So I think Mars in Aries is saying, how can I become a unique point of consciousness, and what do I have to get rid of and sever away from so that I can become independent? Think about Mars and Aries as a teenager that's trying to sever from its parents and say, I need to become independent. This is what I am, and this is what you are not. And that's a process that we all go through in life, maybe multiple times in different situations, is what are we and what are we not? And this was creating some tension over the last few weeks because of the opposition with Venus, because Venus is saying, well, how can we work together? How are we alike? How can we reunify the things that have been separated? So we're seeing this play out in America with uh, our election, that was where we said, this is who we've elected. And a certain faction of the country is celebrating and saying, how do we bring everybody back together? There's a whole other part of the country that's like, oh my God, this is terrible. And they're feeling upset and angry and things like that. So it's a very polarized type of feeling. Um, Mars is going to be in the terms of Mercury from 12 to 20 degrees. So there is this quality of destabilization, of questioning who we are and who we are not. So that is what Mars is being asked to do by its bound lord Mercury, is contest uh, our sense of identity. Um, Mars is still receiving the overcoming squares from Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter is trying to help, but it's not in a position to do so. Saturn is providing limitation and hardship for Mars right now. There is a need to think about the collective. There is a need to think about how we fit into a society and whether our actions are responsible. And, think about this as like a teenager is trying to go off and establish their own identity, but yet they, like think about it like this. If a parent will expand their world slightly and the child wants to go have it all overnight, uh, then sometimes the parent, Saturn, has to establish those boundaries once again. And every once in a while, you expand the boundaries and then you contract them. Think about this with Jupiter and Saturn. Every once in a while, we may see our worlds expanding slightly, and then we have to contract them again because there may not be something that benefits everyone by the actions that we're taking. We're seeing this with the coronavirus and with the Jupiter Pluto conjunction that we experienced last week, which is a peak, and we're seeing the numbers rise again, where we want to expand our worlds. We want to take action and get back to interacting on a social level, especially with the holiday season coming up. But yet, we really have to think about the ramifications of that and potentially be denied some of those personal desires. I actually would really encourage you to consider your holiday plans very carefully coming up, as There are many recommendations by leading scientists that are involved in giving us the information that we need, that it's not a very good idea to get together with family in large groups or to have parties or celebrations. And I think this is a great time to think outside the box. It doesn't mean you can't connect with people. It just means that you need to do it in a way that is responsible, potentially through like things like Zoom or online or through smaller groups. And I think that that's the way to get through this period of time, because we're really starting to see some hardship. We're continuing the hardship, but it's starting to increase with the our hospitals being overwhelmed and things like that. I've had some friends right now that have been dealing with COVID, and their parents and things like that. And luckily, some of them are starting to do a little bit better, but that's hasn't been the case for over 250,000 um, Americans who have lost their lives to this disease. So please, I would encourage you to continue to be vigilant and to continue to be careful. And one less than ideal holiday may gift you with a future with those people down the road. And I can't stress that enough. Sometimes we have to delay gratification, and that's really what we're being asked to do through the end of this year and possibly into next year. Delayed gratification. That's the mature thing to do. Okay, let's talk about Venus. Venus will be moving from Libra into Scorpio this week. So it'll start off from 23 to 30 degrees of Libra. It is moving fast. It will conjoin the fixed stars Spica and Arcturus around 24 degrees of Libra. Those are pretty positive fixed stars, Spica being the more fortunate of those two. We'll break those down when we get to our daily report. It is in its own domicile and in its own terms from 21 to 28 degrees. So, terms of Venus. It will move into the terms of Mars from 28 to 30 degrees. So, a little bit of a challenge to our Venusian harmony when we get to the end of the week. Venus will make an exact square to Jupiter on the 16th and then to Saturn on the 19th. So, very active week for Venus, excuse me. Having a real tough conversation with those Capricorn planets right now. There is a desire to expand. There's a desire to have luxurious tastes and things like that, but eventually the bill will come due. We're also dealing with a continued opposition with Mars in Aries. So while the tension is starting to release, we've had the peak moment that happened last Monday. We're still feeling that tension that might get a little bit of relief when Venus moves into Mars. At least the conversation will shift between Venus and Mars. It doesn't mean that Venus's condition is going to improve, but it will be out of that tension with Mars. Okay. So once Venus moves into Scorpio, it will move from 0 to 2 degrees of Scorpio. It will still be fast in motion. It moves into its exile. It does gain triplicity rulership of the water signs by day. So there is some dignity where Venus has communal support. It isn't in its own sign anymore. In fact, it's in a sign that is foreign to it. It is in the domicile of Mars in Scorpio. And that is a tough position because we may try to create harmony through martial means, through being aggressively severing from things, through aggressively pursuing desire, lust, some of the more carnal pleasures of life. And this is, if you have a Venus in a Mars ruled sign like Scorpio or Aries, one of the things that happens is it's really easy to get to go afoul of the natural order of things, because in situations where you may try to pursue something when the natural response would be to allow it to come to you. Remember, Venus is the deity that emerged from the ocean like sea foam, right? It was born of sea foam and emerged from the ocean, and she was adorned by these little cherubs or these nymphs, that gifted her with all of these things, and all she had to do was just glow with her phosphorescent essence like a jellyfish. She didn't have to pursue any of it. It just came to her. And we can think of Venus as the good fortune that just comes to us through 2K, through not having to do anything, through just persuasion, through just a glance, through a look, through a smell, through beautifying ourselves or glamorizing ourselves. We can receive things. Now, when Venus gets into Scorpio, it's a little bit different. We may a little bit aggressively pursue these things that may lead us into some peril. So this is one of the things I would urge you to consider when Venus moves into Scorpio is, can you still allow things to come to you rather than, aggressively pursue them? So check your desires. Again, when a planet moves through Scorpio, it is moving through territory that is asking us to separate from the body old forms to return to our own spiritual goal, I guess, or return to the collective spiritual essence. So Venus is going through that journey. So there may have to be, Venus may experience some separations, okay, in Scorpio that are painful for her, because what she really wants to do is bring things back together. And it's very difficult for her because the essence of this temple is to separate things, is to relieve us of the burden of old illusions, of old habits, of old desires, of old forms that are no longer serving us. So that may be true for some of our relationships too. We may be releasing some of the old relationships, some of the old desires, some of the old pleasures that are, no longer serving us or serving the collective. So consider that with Venus moving into Scorpio. Venus will be in the terms of Mars from 0 to 7 degrees, co-present with Mercury in Scorpio, and then in sextile with Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn. Its host will become Mars in Aries, where it has that aversion relationship, whereas it is in aversion to it. Now, the type of aversion that we're looking at is the Saturnian aversion. I've explained this in the past, but let's say we have Venus here, and we're talking about an aspect relationship right now. Now, right now, let's say we have the mercurial type of aversion when a planet is one sign away from something. So like Venus will be in a mercurial aversion to the sun once it moves into Scorpio, but it'll be in a Saturnian aversion to Mars, its host. Now, the difference between those two things, now I want you to take this with a grain of salt, because there is that mitigating factor of like ingirding with Mars ruling both of these signs, so that there may be a secret relationship. But in general, that Saturnian aversion is that planet is turned away. It has abandoned that planet. It has abandoned the testimony that that planet wants to bring into existence. Whereas the mercurial aversion is just saying, I'm going to make this really unstable. I'm going to contest everything. I'm going to make it so that you can't get clarity. It's like a confusing, I think, relationship. So like we may not be able to get clarity on our relationships as far as how it feeds our identities with the relationship with the sun and Venus because of that mercurial aversion. But with Mars and Venus here, it's just kind of turned away. It's got other business. It's trying to take care of something else. But again, there's this secret relationship called like and girding that I want to stress, maybe mitigating that Saturnian denial of the resources that it wants. Okay, let's move forward to Mercury. Mercury this week is moving from 6 to 16 degrees of Scorpio. It is fast in motion. It will start off the week peregrine, but then move into its own terms at the end of the week. It's in the terms of Mars from 0 to 7 degrees, the terms of Venus from 7 to 11 degrees, and then the terms of Mercury from 11 to 19 degrees. It will be conjoining a number of fixed stars this week. It will be conjoining the fixed star ACRUX at 12 degrees Scorpio. It will be conjoining the fixed star ALPHECCA at 12 degrees of Scorpio. The ALPHECCA is a little bit off in a different direction on the ecliptic. ACRUX is below. It has a southern declination, whereas ALPHECCA is in the northern part. Mercury will also conjoin the fixed star ZUBEN ELGENUBI at 15 degrees of Scorpio, which was the southern claw or the southern pan, which was associated with justice and social justice, but harsh justice, like harsh justice, with with justice that was a little bit, like a difficult punishment, like nothing that you give is ever enough type of experience. Whereas its northern pan, Zubin El Shamali, was the, you finally paid your dues, you've given enough, and balance is sort of restored, I think. Um, Mercury's going to be making an exact opposition to Uranus this week on the 17th, which is Tuesday. It will also be moving under the sun's beams on Sunday, the 22nd. So Mercury goes back into the underworld and disappears from view. Now it is moving pretty fast, though. Like in um, when Mercury is moving retrograde, it's moving very slow. When Mercury is going into that superior conjunction, okay, when it's direct in motion, it's moving very fast. So it's kind of like dipping through the underworld again, like conjoining with the sun, and then coming back out and getting ready to station retrograde again. So, but we'll look at that when we get to our daily forecast. Mercury will be co-present with the sun in Scorpio and sextile to Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, and also co-present with Venus. Its host will be Mars in that same inversion relationship, but also in the liking girding. So that Mars is really playing quite a role for the planets this week. Maybe frustrating to move forward because we're had that square from Saturn to Mars, but again, we're still we're still in a period of time where we're getting rid of the old and preparing for the new. We're getting there. We just have to be patient. This is a transition period, and we're in a transition period with the United States and their leadership, and we have certain leaders in our government that are still trying to prop up the illusion that they are going to still be in power. This is part of the sun moving through the third decan of Scorpio, is the suffering that comes from chasing past opportunity and past dreams. And you can really alleviate the suffering by letting go and saying, you know what, this is just the reality of our situation now, and we have to move forward. The wheel keeps on spinning. A lot of our human suffering comes from trying to grasp things that have passed through the passage of time. And I think one of the ways to stay even keeled and to stay balanced in your life is to really be realistic about what where you're at in your life and what forms are feeding you vitality or feeding others vitality, and which ones have outlived their usefulness, and how do we return that spark of spirit back to the pool of resource to be reborn again. Okay, because that energy has to go somewhere. And if we keep holding on to the old forms, we're really blocking ourselves from the rebirth that wants to happen in a new form. And that's how you can have faith when you're letting go of things, is that energy does want to keep recycling itself. It just is going to be in a different form. Even when we die, we're giving up this body, and we're giving up this life and this identity, but perhaps to be born again in another dimension, in another life, in another time. Who knows? I don't know that for sure, but that's what these ancient mystics and religious systems were telling us. So that's where the concept of faith comes in, is having faith in the process, and we can practice that faith on a daily basis to prepare us for that ultimate transition that we all have to make eventually. We can practice and flex our transition muscles and our faith muscles just by releasing, I guess, hmm, forms that have less, I don't know, finality to it, right? Or uh, less at stake. Like it's easier to get rid of I don't know. This past week, I got rid of a really old television that we had. It's much easier to let go of that, which that's trivial compared to all this, uh, than it is to let go of like a relationship. But that's good practice for letting go eventually of of the separation of the spirit from your body. So you can think about it in just that you're kind of in training for that ultimate transition. And life is sort of like a training ground on some level, at least if you choose to view it that way. Some people don't choose to view it that way, and that's okay. That's how I view it. And I like to think about it like that. Um, let's talk about the moon. The moon this week is going to be waxing from that new moon that happened at 23 degrees of Scorpio, which is that third decan that we've been talking about associated with Kairos, aka opportunity. And we're going to see it moving into a first quarter phase. It will be starting the week off fast in motion and then slowing down. I have a little shortcut on my planetary condition report where you see the moon when it is in opposition to black moon Lilith here, or the lunar apogee, we can call this, okay? It is fast in motion. The closer it gets, though, to this lunar apogee, the more it slows down. All right. So over the course of the week, you're seeing it starting to pass over into getting close to that position, and it starts to become slower from apparent in its apparent motion from our position here on Earth. The moon will have dignity by the face in the second decan of Sagittarius starting the week. It will move into its exile, but gain triplicity by the nighttime of the Earth signs in Capricorn. It will have dignity in the third face of Aquarius, and then it will be peregrine in um, Pisces, where it finishes the week. And we're going to see the square between the Sagittarius sun and the Pisces moon. So we'll break that down when we get to it. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about before we get into the dailies is I pulled I did an I Ching for this week. I Ching is a Chinese oracle or divinatory system where you toss sticks or toss coins, and then you get you get a hexagram that has changing lines. So you have a condition, and then what that condition is changing into. And this week was really interesting because I got number 64, which is called Before the End. And before the end is kind of about the story is that there is a little fox that's trying to cross a river and get to the other side, and there's all these kind of perils, about realizing that, oh my God, I'm crossing this river, and we're not quite across the river yet. There's still some challenges to get over to the other side. And that really feels like it speaks to where we're at as a country in the United States, where we feel this tension and maybe this anxiety about crossing over to this new reality, leaving this old trauma behind. I think as a country, we've gone through quite a bit of trauma over the last 4 years in particular, from my perspective, with a very divisive president who has split people and who has contributed to this unsettled or destabilized position that we find ourselves in now. And eventually, I think we may come back into some unity. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a hard process. I still see many people doubling down on their positions, and that's frustrating, but we'll get through it. And that's part of the faith of the process. But the hexagram it's moving into is number one, which is creation, which is the birth of the new. I thought that was such a beautiful hexagram pair for this week. Is we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And hope is going to return. And we're getting closer to that quality of hope that I think we will see moving forward. It's not going to be perfect. We've got a lot of challenges to deal with. We've got a lot of listening to do to a lot of different people. We have a lot of things that are still unfair, still unequal, still there's still systems that are very broken, and we begin to fix those by listening to one another and eliminating the I don't know, trying not to come at it from a position of hatred, trying to come at it from a position of love and a position of like, how do we make this the best possible country and system and earth for everybody? I know that a lot of my friends in foreign countries have been watching our elections with great interest. And it could, because for better or for worse, America does have a lot of influence on the world stage. And I'm not saying that it was gained ethically or anything like that. I mean, I'm very critical of my country a lot of the times, but I do believe that at its core, there is some beautiful idealism associated with it. Now, has that played out materially? Has there been corrupt actions that have taken place to help it rise to power? Absolutely. And those things need to be dealt with and reckoned with. And I think we are dealing with them. And we are having a reckoning right now when it comes to equality for uh, people of color, for indigenous people, for really embodying what those founding fathers wrote into those documents, where they said all men, aka all people, what it should be, are created equal. And that's something that, if we really want to embody the idealistic vision of that document, then there has to be changes. Now, granted, that was written at a time where most of those men held slaves. And that's a paradox that we have to come to terms with in America. And a lot of the wealth that we have in this country was built off of that free labor. And that's something we have to reckon with. And we have a lot of people that don't want that to change. You know, they don't want to give up the power and the resources that they've, you know, ill-begotten resources. They don't want to give up their land and that they've benefited from, you know, a few centuries of colonization. And that's something we have to reckon with. So I'm not going to solve all those problems in one astrological forecast, but I'll try to contextualize them, and I'll sound the alarm. I'll keep saying that those are things that are important. You know, maybe we get a little bit of temporary relief by having a president that isn't actively trying to pit us one against the other, but that doesn't mean that we don't still hold that person accountable and ask them to help be part of the change that needs to happen for a more just society. And I will give it to you like this. I'll say it like this. There was, and you're free to disagree with me on this. So there's two perspectives I could see with this. One perspective is that we're moving from a president that would absolutely not be able to listen to anybody beyond his own completely subjective perspective to one that maybe we have an opportunity to get to listen to the people. And some of you would argue that, well, that it needs to get really bad before it gets better, or we need to completely burn the whole thing down before we can reconstruct it. And the danger is that because the volume or the heat has been turned down, by having someone who isn't as actively uh, calling for division as Donald Trump is, that people will fall back into complacency of the old systems that were not fair, which is a legitimate criticism. Um, Now, I personally believe that there's just work to do. I think that it is my personal opinion is it is a good thing that you don't have somebody actively creating that division. But that puts the responsibility back on you. That puts the responsibility back on your citizens to continue to be the change that you want to see and to continue putting pressure on that system. Don't forget what a person like Donald Trump revealed about this system. Okay. Just because the heat has been turned down, don't fall back into that complacency. That's the important mission moving forward. And there's a whole lot of healing to do. And there's a whole lot of coming back to reality, because we've had a person in office that has deliberately tried to distort our reality for a very long period of time. And he's been very effective. And there is a large portion uh, of our populace that is living in a completely different reality than another large portion of the population. And uh, that is something that we're going to have to really deal with. And how can we bring things back to a shared reality? I don't even know if it's like a fact versus truth or versus lies type of thing, but I think it can be. But I think when society functions, we have to have some sort of shared consensus as to what our reality is. That's how our democracy works. You know, like think about it like this. You know, there's concerns right now that, you know, we're not having a peaceful transfer of power. And that's something that was held sacred in American democracy, because that is a shared reality that we say, you know, yes, one person lost, but now they will concede an election and we will move forward. And that preserves the integrity of an election. When somebody throws all of the election into question and says, this was done illegally, this was unfair, blah, 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 that creates a consensus reality that is not matching up and hence can create the civil unrest that we may be, yeah, that we are experiencing. Uh, so, how do we get back to that shared sense of reality? How do we get back to a shared reality that is beneficial for everyone? And, you know, I don't know. I think it just starts by listening. I think it starts by starting to have hope. Uh, I think it is important to denounce the some of the shadow horrific type of treatment that we've seen bubble up from our shadow and our underworld type of experience over the last 4 years through this Pluto return of America. It's important to deal with those things. Can't just ignore them. That's part of how they got the way that they got. But then we have to have the turnaround. You can't point out all the bad things without the turnaround. It's kind of that compliment sandwich, right? We say, here's how it happens. We say, look, America has this ideal. Okay, we have this ideal that is baked into our constitutional and Declaration of Independence documents, Bill of Rights documents. That's the good. Then we have like, okay, this is the reality of how this is actually playing out, and here's the unjust things of how that's not actually being enacted. That's the bad. And then we have to go back to the other part of the sandwich, the compliment sandwich, right? We say, well, how do we get back to this ideal? How do we move forward towards this ideal for everyone? It's not that this country is fundamentally flawed, okay? It's that the ideal is not matching the reality. So the beautiful thing about America is that we are a country of people who persevere, but also a country of people who like to innovate. And this is a country where we should start innovating and figuring out how are we going to move closer to that ideal that is baked into the formation of the country and get back to the real idealism. I mean, this whole like this "Make America Great Again" movement was like, let's make America like the 1950s, and I got news for you. It was not great in the 1950s. It was some of the most inequitable times and kind of like, um, I don't know, illusioned times that you can think of. If you really want to make America great, maybe for the first time, you need to go back to that driving idealism, okay? Not necessarily rooted in the actions of slaveholders, but the rooted idealism of a country that is created equal for everyone, a country that accepts immigrants from other countries, where this is a land of opportunity for everyone, where you can come here and try to build a better life. And I don't think that better life necessarily has to be the capitalistic American dream. That's the other problem that we have right now. We've gotten so wrapped up in like, how do we get our own stuff? How do we become rich like these other people? And that may be the wrong dream. That's the capitalist dream. But I don't think that that is necessarily baked into the essence of our country, or I don't think that it should be, if I'm being 100% honest. So those are some things to think about with the Planetary Condition report and some of my philosophical viewpoints as we move forward to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that's happening at the winter solstice, as we try to decide how we're going to create a new paradigm in these Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in the air signs, which only happens, we only shift elements, we're shifting from earth to air. It only happens once every 200 to 300 years. Okay, this is, maybe we're moving away from that capitalistic American dream where we're trying to like have, cultivate all this land for ourselves and use it as a resource, to a land of idealism, of ideals, of ideas, of air, of where we're sharing something, and there's this less of a rat race for stuff and making things like industrialized nations are apt to do, and more of a pursuit of knowledge, a pursuit of platonic idealized forms, an exchange of information, right? And I think that's what we're moving towards. And that's where we have to reimagine the American dream, the American ideal. So maybe I'll do a video on this later that's more specifically on that. But all of my stuff kind of gets consolidated into these weekly forecasts. So there you go. Let's move forward. Let's move forward to Monday the 16th. It's when I started this forecast this week, I waited for Aquarius to be on the ascendant. And that little digression on America seems to be very indicative of that Aquarius experience, you know, that like, how can we figure out all these things for everyone in the best way possible? So there you go. All right, let's move forward to Monday. See if I can get my chart to cooperate with me. Bear with me. Thank you. All right. On Monday, November the 16th, the moon is going to start out in Sagittarius. We're continuing our new moon phase that we started on Sunday. And we're going to see the first aspect that this new moon makes is a trine with Mars. So we're going to be wanting to move forward with some of that self-directed action. So that aspect will perfect at 11:20 a.m. at 15 degrees of Sagittarius and Aries, respectively. The moon will then come into a square with Neptune at 4:06 p.m. From Sagittarius to Pisces. So we're going to want to move forward, but we might be a little bit confused about our identities and what we want to do. And we may lose a little steam by the afternoon. We may burn ourselves out in the morning and then, kind of go off into the dreamland in the afternoon. We do have a few significations coming up with Venus on this day. Venus is going to be squaring Jupiter at 12:32 a.m. So we may feel that over the weekend moving into Monday, and it will start to separate over the course of Monday. Now, this Jupiter Venus square, Venus is in the overcoming position. You can see this here. Okay, so Venus has the upper hand on Jupiter, where Venus is trying to harmonize, is trying to bring things back together, whereas Jupiter is trying to confirm and stabilize things. Generally, and this is something that I was reading about in Ren Butler's book, The Archetypal Universe, he talks about extravagance, decadence, overindulgence, conspicuous consumption, that like I was talking about with our late stage capitalism here. We may be trying to smooth things over with our superiors or trying to gain the favor of our superiors. We could also be trying to glamorize positions of power, since Jupiter is in that third decan of Capricorn, which is called the throne, where we're trying to administrate earthly power. So we may be glamorizing or trying to bring into balance the way that we administrate our earthly positions. Okay, so our worlds, our hierarchical structures. So I guess be careful of that, of trying to overdo it with things and glamorizing power. But this may bring you a little bit of poise under pressure as well. I think that's what we're looking at with Venus in the third decan of Libra is we're really able to keep our equilibrium when all of these competing interests are happening around us, when chaos is happening around us. It's the eye of the hurricane, so to speak. Now, some other interesting things that are happening on Monday is that Venus will be passing over a very fortunate area of the zodiac. At around 24 degrees of Libra, it will be making a conjunction with the fixed star Spica. And Spica is also close to the fixed star Arcturus. So we sort of talk about those together. They have different energy, but let's break down Spica first. I'm going to go over to the star chart here. Now we're looking at the 16th, and there's the sun. All right, so Venus is over here. There's Venus, and here is Spica. Okay, so Spica is in the hand of the Virgin. Okay, the hand of Demeter. You could think about it like that, or you could think about the hand of Mother Mary in Christian mythology. And this was Spica was the wheat ear. This was the kind of the gift that you gain after the harvest season. It was the concentration point of the harvest cycle. So it's kind of like when you've separated and you've purified, what are you left with? What gift are you left with? What did you really grow into existence? And Venus may be telling you what type of relationships you've grown that are a gift. Okay, so this is where you may be attracting benefits from the sacred feminine, okay, from patrons, from your using your powers of persuasion and your grace and your ability to create win-win situations. You may see that you're reaping the benefits of that type of action with Venus on the fixed star Spica. Now, I like to also think of Venus as a process of catharsis because of its relationship with being responsible for the purity of the Greek dramas, which were concerned with expressing deep emotions. So a lot of the times, Venus was thought of as a ritualistic, purifying essence. So you may be able to find catharsis or purification in your life through sharing your gifts or through receiving a gift. Sometimes we can allow someone else to feel good about themselves by being able to be open to receiving what they have to give us. There's sometimes it's a much better feeling to be able to give to others than to receive. So we are both in turn allowing others to feel that, and we feel that ourselves when we give. So maybe allow yourself to receive help around this time. You may be connecting with talented associates, gifted associates that are able to move you forward in your life. All right. Been thinking about this. I've been, I'm full disclosure. I made another big book order this week, and I have some really cool stuff coming to me in regards to fixed stars, in regards to Greek mythology, and the Greek philosophical basis for astrology. So some of those things are going to start seeping into the forecast, I hope. But thinking about fixed stars, I had this really interesting thought as I was listening to some Robert Schmidt material. Um, and he was talking about the tropical zodiac versus the sidereal zodiac, or the one that was more based on the position of constellations. And one point that I wanted to make that he made that really rang a lot of bells for me was that the fixed stars are not just this million points of power everywhere. They are one power that has many different points. And that one power is that it is an outer sphere. It's containing all of these divine laws. Okay, it is, and they are fixed. So these are things we are drawing upon that are maybe less negotiable than even some of the planetary energies. The planets themselves were sort of like these intermediaries between the laws of the fixed stars and the cosmic one mind, the great divinity, okay, and us on Earth. So Venus may be negotiating on our behalf to receive the gifts of Spica. So do you see what I'm saying? Like, and one other thing I was thinking about with that is he is perhaps suggesting that there are certain qualities in the tropical zodiac that we retain, like modality, like cardinal fixed immutable, like triplicity, water, earth, air, fire, like gender, masculine, feminine, diurnal, nocturnal. But perhaps there are some of these other qualities that we study, like in medieval astrology, like barren, like aquatic, terrestrial, that are more based on these constellations. And we have to shift those meanings based on the concept of precession because the two zodiacs do not match up. And for example, we're looking at Spica in the constellation of Virgo, but this whole area here, this red line, okay, this is this is the this is tropical Libra. So we may have to adjust the way that we think about Libra with some of these Virgo qualities, with some of these Demeter qualities, with some of these Spica qualities. Okay. And I've been trying to do that with my forecast here for all of you is kind of blend this fixed star energy and tropical zodiac energy. To me, that's a really interesting thing because there's a lot of arguments about what is the real zodiac, the tropical or the sidereal or the constellational or whatever. And I think that I really like that assertion by Schmidt that, it's both. And it changes. There's also in Austin Coppock's book, he talks about the decans, or each 10-degree section of a sign throughout history had to shift because precession changes where the position of these constellations are in relationship to the zodiac. Now, one thing to remember about the zodiac is it's based on seasonal light. So we have these archetypal mythical stories playing out, but we also have the story of the relationship of light. So we have like the equinoxes where the light is equal. We have the solstices where the sun is at its height, and then the solstice, winter solstice, where the sun is at its lowest point, and the transition points between those seasonal crosses of matter. Okay. And one thing that you need to consider is that, yes, right now we're in the fixed part of fall. So this area right here, from this red line to this red line, sorry for those of you just listening, it is the tropical portion of the zodiac that is associated with Scorpio, which is the fixed, solid, stable part of fall. Okay. So we may be really like having a stabilization of our identity, of our gnosis, of our vitality, but moving towards composting, moving towards letting go. But we also have to consider the story of the scales, because that constellation is in this particular tropical area now. Okay. And we have to consider justice. We have to consider punishment. And I think that these are the kind of things, that the stories that we have to start really examining to get a clear picture of how we're going to use this astrology. And then we can look at those extra zodiacal constellations as well. I think that the constellations and the fixed stars that are really near the ecliptic, this green line, the path of the sun across the sky, they speak really loudly. So for example, SPICA is speaking very loudly because it's very close to the ecliptic. Now we're going to examine another fixed star called Arcturus right here, which is still on that projected ecliptical line. Okay. But it is farther off the ecliptic. Maybe it is not speaking as loud as Spica. Spica has quite a an influence, but Arcturus is still part of the equation. So Arcturus. Now there are other astrologers out there that will talk about the use of parans or paranatella. Bernadette Brady was the one that kind of brought that back into the consciousness of astrologers. And I will admit, I've studied some of Brady's paranatella type of stuff, but I haven't gone into a deep dive with her course. So I can't speak with authority on that. But I do know that there were many different ways to use these fixed stars, whether it was projecting it out from the ecliptic or putting a star. The relationship, parans is basically the relationship between a planet and a star on one of the angles. Okay. And the concept, from my limited understanding, is that it helps you get a more three-dimensional viewpoint of the sky. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring in with Schmidt that came across my mind was that he's talking about these stars aren't just, one isn't just active in your life. Basically it's like they're all active. They're all speaking, like they're all imparting different laws. And I don't have a confirmation on this, but one thought I had is that these stars, they may speak louder if they're conjuncture ascendant, or if they're conjuncture midheaven, or if they're in a particular relationship with a planet, but they're still active in some part of your life. So like, for example, if you have Libra in the fourth house, perhaps Spica and Arcturus are lending their power or their law, that their significations to fourth house themes, like your family, your parents. Maybe you have a talented parent. Maybe you have someone who's really gifted or provides you with gifts. Okay. And all of you Cancer risings can tell me if this is true or not, right? Do you have a family member that was very talented or provided gifts or something like that? Or, like Or were they a trailblazer with Arcturus? So Arcturus is part of this constellation here called Bootes. And Bootes, or Bootes, is the plowsman. He was also called the guardian of the bear, because you can see the bear here. Here is Ursa Major, who is walking around the pole. And Arcturus, or Bootes, Arcturus is the bright star here in Bootes, the double star. And Arcturus was the hunter. You can see he has a spear in his hand and hunting dogs, that became a farmer. Here's his sickle, all right? And this is the transition from that hunter-gatherer society to an agrarian society. It has themes of domestication. It has themes of being able to be a gentle leader, or some kind of trailblazer also, somebody who is a visionary. So with Venus here, you may find that you are becoming an artistic visionary, or you're finding that you are getting into a union that is blazing a trailblazing union. This could be creating harmony as we transition from a more like, raw, intuitive type of experience or social experience that is difficult to create consensus, to one that's more domesticated. And domestication is just following rules, that like social rules and social graces, so that we can, cooperate as a society. So on Monday the 16th, we may see some themes with starting to domesticate some of this raw barbaric energy that we've been experiencing for, I don't know, forever how long. Okay. So yeah, maybe leave a comment and see if that plays out. Find the Libra house, and do you have some themes of having a special gift, or having a kind of a trailblazing type of thing in your own chart, in where Libra is placed? I have these stars in the third house of my chart, which I guess, I don't have any blood siblings. I have a lot of step siblings, things like that. But this could also be people in your community. This could be people that you are in your, in your neighborhood. This could be the short journeys, the familiar journeys that you take. And I would say that I have a lot of gifts have come to me through just visiting local establishments. Like when I was a professional musician, I would make a lot of connections and a lot of unions by just going to another local musician's show. Okay, so that's one example of like, I just went through and did something in my local community, and it brought me an interesting opportunity. So you can think of it, experiment, play with it a little bit, and see if this resonates with you. I'm not saying that's exactly how it works. I'm just saying that's an idea that I have that seems like it would be worth further exploration. All right, let's go back to our chart, and let's move forward to Tuesday. All right, on Tuesday, November the 17th, the moon will start off in Sagittarius and move into Capricorn at 11:34 a.m. We're continuing our new moon phase. The moon will sextile Venus at 2:54 a.m. at 24 degrees Sagittarius and Libra, and then it'll move into Capricorn at 11:34 a.m. The big news of the day on Tuesday the 17th is that Mercury will be making an opposition to Uranus. Now, this is the direct opposition. We had a retrograde opposition a few weeks ago. That was the week after Donald Trump was diagnosed with the coronavirus, and he was talking about his miraculous healing and doing all the strange stuff. And he also came to a point where he shut down negotiations between Congress and the two parts of Congress, and the Senate and the House, regarding the stimulus package. So there are two things I think that could come up with this. Maybe there is more negotiations that are revisited again about that stimulus package, and Congress trying to figure out what the hell to do to bring some relief to Americans. But it being difficult. I don't know what kind of resolution could happen with that. Mercury is bringing instability, or contesting what needs to stay and what needs to go. So there's probably argument about what do we need to cut out of this, And think about it, the lawyer on the stand is questioning, let's say, let's use that stimulus package as an example. That's um, the witness on the witness stand. This is what we're trying to make a judgment on, if you want to think about the witness and testimony type of themes. And Mercury is the lawyer and arguing for the position of this needs to go, this needs to go, we can't spend this, this is a form that's bloated, let's get rid of it. Whereas Uranus is, if we think about Schmidt's take on Uranus, he thinks of it as a transcendental sun, where it is the idealization of a community, the idealization of the collective. It is that lightning bolt of awareness, the gift, the Promethean gift from the gods, trying to give us the ability to create new forms from a universal ideal. And that's hanging out in the first decan of Taurus, which is about like fertile fields, about plowing the fields, about planting seeds. So this may be a real conflict between a faction of the population that is trying to argue for removing things, and this idealism of how we provide and how we give our resources to other people. So I would not be surprised whatsoever to see some things with the stimulus package being argued, or even come to another stalemate on November the 17th. That is a very interesting way the symbolism would play out. All right, in your own life, think about how that would relate to your own life. What is the stimulus package of your own life? What kind of thing are you arguing for removing certain things and idealizing new growth? Okay, so like for example, I have this on my 10th and 4th house axis. I've got Uranus in the 10th, okay, and Mercury in the 4th. So over the next week or so, I may be very idealistic about what I want to do publicly and in my career and how I want to move forward and take action, praxis out in the world. But there may be some questions coming up of like, how does that affect my home life? How does that affect my domestic life? What needs to be changed so that I can, enact that revolution out in the public world? And that's definitely, I can attest that that's been true. Like I've been really revamping my daily routine. I've been, trying to shift some of the responsibilities in my day-to-day life so that I can do more things out in the world. Like I've been doing a lot of research in private so that eventually I can bring that to the light of day. So think about that access in your own life and where you may experience some questions that are ultimately trying to feed a new idealized growth pattern. Okay. All right. That's what I got for Tuesday. Let's move on. On Wednesday, November the 18th, the moon will be in Capricorn. We will begin the crescent phase of our lunar cycle. The moon will be making a trine to Uranus at 1 a.m. from Capricorn, 7 degrees Cap to 7 Taurus. We're going to see a sextile from the moon to Mercury at 3:31 a.m. and then a square to the moon to Mars at 1:41 p.m. We'll finish our evening with a sextile from the moon to Neptune. All right, so the moon is in a place that it's not super comfortable in. The moon is trying to collect everything. It's collecting light. It's collecting the masses, the public, but it's in a place that is associated with consolidation and death. Moon wants to bring things into form, especially as it's waxing, but it's in a place of consolidation. So this may be a time where we're really trying to let go of things. Remember, this whole lunar cycle is about letting go of things. So this may be where you really have to get real about what needs to stay and what needs to go. Now, there is harmony between these lights. They are in a sextile relationship. They are kind of trying to harmonize the divine knowledge that you need to let go of illusions with consolidating the forms. Okay, so So the moon is actually going to be assisting in that process on this day. So this might not be as difficult of a Capricorn moon as it would normally be if it was not in a good relationship with the sun. Now, the other thing we're going to be seeing on Wednesday, the 18th, is that Mercury is going to be moving into the second decan of Scorpio at 12:37 p.m. So you can see it at about 9 degrees here, but it'll move into 10 degrees around lunchtime. So this second decan of Scorpio, it is ruled by the Sun and Jupiter in both the Chaldean order face rulership system and then the triplicity rulership system. It's associated with the Six of Cups in the tarot. Book T and Book of Thoth calls it pleasure, and Austin Coppock calls this decan an apparatus for mutual distillation. There's a number of fixed stars in this decan, including ACRUX, ALPHECCA, ZUBEN ELGENUBI, and ZUBEN El-Shamali. The daimon or spirit of this decan is called Leto, who is the mother of both Apollo and Artemis. So this decan, and a lot of this information is coming from Austin Coppock's excellent book, 36 Faces. He did so much of the legwork for us. It's just such a gift. And hopefully that'll be coming out again soon so that all of you can have access to that information firsthand. Well, if we see this card, the Six of Cups, we see a figure giving a gift to someone else, this exchange. There is some tarot readers that associate this with innocence and also nostalgia. So this could be where we are remembering these exchanges between one another. But this is part of the, remember, we're in the sign that is about letting go. So perhaps this is a place where we revisit the past so that we can come to terms with it. So we realize that there's a need to let go of something or that we've lost something. It's almost like the stages of grief, right? You go through this, like you realize that you're about to lose something. Maybe this is the stages of grief that Donald Trump is going through. I don't know. And then you go through this like, oh, I don't know, bargaining phase or denial phase where you're remembering all the good times. But it isn't real. Do you know what I'm saying? It is not the fecundity of the second decan of Taurus. It's opposite. It's not the birth of these new forms. It's just this memory. It's this ancient memory of something past. And sometimes you have to revisit those things. There may be a relationship in your life that you have to revisit where you're really trying to get to the heart of what you're trying to glean from it. I think that's what Austin Coppock is talking about with distillation. You're really trying to process the past, okay? And in this case, we may be having this processing energy with people in our life where we do get into a deep emotional conversation or a deep emotional bond with somebody where we are exchanging information, but on putting our heads together on this deep level and intermixing our essences, okay? But eventually something is alchemized from that, okay? And eventually I think the thing that is alchemized is we learn whatever lesson that we can take from that, and then we have to release the form. That's what happens in the third decan is, we're starting to really come to terms with those illusions. And if we hang on to them, if we chase those old ghosts, we chase those old memories, that's when we suffer. When we actually let go of them, we free ourselves for the new mission, for the new goal, for the new enthusiasm and energy that comes in the first decan of Sagittarius. Okay. So with Mercury here, it's okay to revisit the past a little bit. It's okay to like try to figure out what you've learned from the forms that are moving out of your life. I think it's okay to like intermix a little bit, but don't get attached to it. Okay. Maybe this is for your own edification. It's for your own like process. It's to go through that grief process. You may have to revisit some of those past associations, but don't do it with the thought that this is going to reignite it. Okay. That old form. Think about it in context of this is preparing me to let go of it. This is preparing me to say, you know what? This is just an old self. This is an old skin that needs to be shed. And that's okay. That's what I want to tell you. That's what I want to tell you today. It's okay to let go of things. That's the only way you're going to eventually come to the rebirth stage. Don't rush the rebirth stage, though. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to let go. It's okay to remember things. It's okay to acknowledge a life past, but don't get stuck there. Don't get fixated on it. Let it pass through you like an emotion. It's okay to feel an emotion, but don't hold on to it. Don't try to control it. Just feel it. This is why the moon in Scorpio has difficulty. Scorpio is trying to, when we feel these emotions, we're trying to control that emotion. This is something my dad has a Scorpio moon. And I've always argued with him because I have a Taurus moon. It's a very different thing. I feel things and they flow through me. They grow, they sprout, they die, they go, you know? And yeah, I can be stubborn about certain things. But he tells me he can choose to feel or not feel something. He's like, sometimes I just crush all my feelings into a little ball. Which sounds like, that whole like consolidating Scorpio energy. And he's like, I could choose not to feel it. I'm like, man, in my brain, I'm like, that sounds really unhealthy. Like, because I'm of the belief that if you don't acknowledge your feelings, that you can manifest physical dis-ease. So I worry about my dad sometimes, and I worry about that uh, denial of his emotional nature sometimes, and encourage him sometimes to express his feelings so that it doesn't manifest as a physical ailment or illness eventually. So, you know, think about that. Think about what you're going to be working through with that Mercury in the second decan of Scorpio. All right, let's move forward to Thursday. On Thursday, November the 19th, the moon will be in Capricorn and will move into Aquarius at 3:24 p.m., continuing our crescent moon phase. Now, that crescent moon phase is where we're gathering resources, where we're gathering information after the new moon. We're trying to mobilize things. We're trying to get ourselves moving. So we're really trying to mobilize the process of letting go of the past. And the moon's going to make a number of aspects on Thursday, the 19th. This is a very active day. It's going to conjoin all of the Capricorn planets, okay, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. So it's going to first hit Pluto, then Jupiter, then Saturn in the morning. It's going to square Venus at 11:16 a.m. in Libra, and then make a sextile with the Sun at 11:29 a.m. Now, the Sun itself is going to be sextiling Saturn, and Venus is going to be making a square to Saturn. So we've got two non-lunar aspects and a number of lunar aspects activating all this stuff. All right. So let's break this down. So the moon's going through that process of activating Capricorn 3, which is administration of power. And there's a number of different things going on here. You've got Pluto, which is exposing corruption. It's heating the process of change of the both fecundity and fermentation. It's breaking down old structures and encouraging the achemical process of creating new ones. Jupiter is trying to confirm and stabilize those positions of power. It's trying to create abundance, but it's not really able to do so in the way that it prefers. And Saturn is depriving. It has a deprivation energy. It has a quality of time of Ananke, which is something that is compelling us towards completion. Okay, that's what Ananke does. It compels. It uses the quality of time. Kronos and Ananke were lovers. Okay, they were consorts. They were married. So time and the compelling nature are bedfellows. So through the quality of time, we are compelled to do things. And whether we like it or not, time keeps on marching on. Time keeps compelling universal forces to birth and to die. There is growth and there's entropy. And Saturn, I think, represents, we more associate it with the entropy qualities. But I do think that Saturn can birth something as well. I do think that it just takes time. The birth that comes from Saturn is like the result of a long enduring slog through something. It's like the achievement at the end of a lifetime type of thing is the rewards of Saturn, or the rewards of really hard work, or of accepting a fate that you can't change, that accepting a contract or accepting something you've been bound to. Saturn also has the role of nemesis, which we talked about with the third decan of Libra, which is restoring right proportion, it restores balance, sometimes through punishment, sometimes through reward. Okay. So, but it is bringing things back into harmony. And I think we can embrace Saturn on that level. It's not always fun. When we get bloat, when we have overgrown something, we get to a point of diminishing returns where it starts to become toxic. Imagine you had, you're a little kid and you went out and you got a whole bag of Halloween candy. The first few pieces of candy were so delicious. That's Jupiter. It's Venus and Jupiter, right? It's like, oh, I've received candy, Venus, and I'm going to eat all of it because I love it, Jupiter. And I'm just going to keep eating and keep eating and keep eating. Well, eventually Saturn comes along and says, maybe in the form of your mom or your dad, or like, stop eating that. You're going to get sick. If you keep eating that, you're going to throw up. If you keep eating that, you're not going to be able to sleep tonight. That's Saturn. And so what is the gift of that? It's restoring you back to balance after you've shoved your face full of Reese's peanut butter cups and Junior Mints to the point of feeling sick. And that's liberation. That's a gift. And yeah, it's not fun, but it's necessary. So I think consider that as we move forward with these contacts with Saturn. Now, Saturn's going to be assisting that process of letting go that we started at the new moon at 23 degrees Scorpio. Okay. There's going to be an awareness of what has to be brought back into balance. And sometimes that comes through death. Okay. Now, with Venus making a square, Venus is that pleasure principle. It's that attraction principle. It is a cleansing principle. Saturn was associated with things that were dirty, things that were old, things that were decaying. I like to think of the Marie Kondo. I think she has a Venus Saturn conjunction, I believe in Libra, where they have a lot of dignity. So she has the life-changing magic of tidying up. So she goes into disgusting, out of balance, places, and she cleans them up, and she takes joy in it. She makes it this beautiful ritualistic thing. And this may be what we are struggling with the square. Whereas we're trying to beautify, we're trying to harmonize, but we realize that the task ahead is daunting. The task ahead is difficult. The task ahead takes time. It takes our inner parent to say, you've had enough Halloween candy. Or if we're in America, you've had enough, rampant, soulless capitalism. You've had enough materialistic, masculine, or machismo independence. It's time to work together, right? You've gone as far as you can go with this, like, I only rely on myself and I'm going to get mine, because that's just not working for everyone. I don't know if it ever did. It probably never did. I mean, there is something slightly romantic about it, I guess, if you choose to romanticize it. But this is the problem that we have. And Donald Trump's a great example of this. He represents that old, like, John Wayne cowboy mentality where and even admitting defeat is this, like, threat to his, imagined masculinity. And I'm here to say that, like, to become a balanced human being, you've got to be both. You've got to be someone independent who also is allowing yourself to receive help. You have to be somebody who is gracious in victory and but also in defeat. And you have to be someone who is in touch with both that diurnal and nocturnal side of yourself, the receptive and the, active part. Otherwise, you just become a caricature of this and you become really out of whack. And I urge you to consider that this week, if this is playing out in your own life, is, many of the spiritual traditions that I've studied and that have been studied over the course of history, they really speak to the concept of balance. They speak to the concept of, the earth is trying to balance itself out. It's trying to create harmony. Okay. Sometimes we get out of harmony and then we return to it. And it's this constant cycle. So I want you to examine where you may be out of balance and out of harmony and or ask Saturn. Don't use Saturn. Ask Saturn to help you restore that right proportion. That's the gift it gives you. And that is worth acknowledging and celebrating. All right. We have a fixed star placement on Thursday as well, with Mercury conjoining both ACRUX at 12 degrees of Scorpio and ALPHECCA at 12 degrees of Scorpio. And I'm going to go over to my star chart here. We'll take a look. We'll move forward to the 19th, if I can get it to work. Hold on a second. All right. So here we're looking at Thursday the 19th. And here's Venus. And Mercury is, where is that wily guy? There he is. Okay. There's Mercury. Mercury's hanging out in the middle of Scorpio, tropical Scorpio. Okay. And we have ALPHECCA right here in the northern crown. Okay. Corona Borealis. And we have ACRUX down here. Okay. Very, very southern latitude in the cross of matter here. Now I wonder, they almost seem equally distant from the ecliptic. So we're going to be kind of trying to draw upon those energies simultaneously. Now, ACRUX and the cross of matter is kind of like, you can think about that like a little mini natal chart in the sky, right? And you have the ascendant and descendant axis and the MC and the IC. You have all of the qualities of like union, birth, breath, action in public, and then you have like separation and judgment, and then like your foundation here. And all of those themes come in with ACRUX. It's about dealing with, how do we incarnate in this? How do we deal with being incarnated on this universal, or on this earth? Okay. This is where, if it's Mercury, thoughts become things. Careful about your thoughts and what you speak, and try to speak into reality. This is where the dream could start to take shape or take form, or where a dream could come out of form, right? Where, because we're in Scorpio, this may be about letting go of a form, all right? We're infusing spirit into matter, or we're separating spirit from matter, okay? You could come up with some practical ideas in this particular area of the zodiac. Now, what is going to be drawn upon with ALPHECCA? Well, this is the crown of flowers that was gifted to Ariadne by Aphrodite at her wedding to Dionysus. Now, Ariadne was a maiden from I believe, the Isle of Crete, who helped the hero Theseus. I think that's his name. Yeah, Theseus, who was trying to escape from the labyrinth of the Minotaur, and she helped him escape. I think she gave him string to lead him out, and she left with Theseus, and then he abandoned her on some island, and Dionysus was like, "Hey, here's an eligible bride," so they got married, and this was the gift of Aphrodite. So this is a fortunate gift of status or power. I mean, if in ancient Greek, it was probably better to be married to a god than to be married to a hero. I think that was probably a step up. We're being gifted that status. And I talked last week about the sun conjoining ALPHECCA, where we were trying to crown a new king. We were trying to gift status upon somebody. And this fixed star had some associations with Princess Diana and Grace Kelly, a princess of Monaco. So these change in statuses. So with Mercury there, Mercury destabilizes. So this may be where we're questioning our status. We're questioning maybe even a gift that we've been giving and saying, is this really benefiting me in the long term? This could be also where you have some really great ideas that could lead to some commercial success. You could have a gift for communicating. And you could, but I think that if I think about it in the Hellenistic way, and I think about it in Schmidt way, uh, Mercury is is the lawyer right now arguing uh, on the status of your status. Does that make sense? Or we could say, well, is this a gift or isn't it? And what is the price of this power? That was another theme with ALPHECCA. Was some people called it a crown of thorns because there was some kind of downfall after being given that status. There was, with Princess Diana, she kind of fell into this. I'm not an expert with her, but she fell into this position of power, and it doesn't sound like it made her all that happy. There was all sorts of issues that she had. She wasn't really happy in her marriage. Eventually, she had an accident because she constantly was pursued by paparazzi and things like that. So, the price of power. So you may be questioning those things as we move through Thursday. All right, let's move back to our chart and we'll move forward to Friday. Thanks for sticking around with me here. Again, these forecasts are long because I do like to not just give you the astrology. I like to teach as I do it. So this is just me teaching as well as forecasting. Maybe those will be split into something separate later on, but this is the form it's taking right now. Okay, on Friday, 11/20, the 20th of November, the moon is in Aquarius, continuing the crescent phase. The moon will be making a square to Uranus at 5:41 a.m. It will be squaring Mercury at 3:15 p.m. and sextiling Mars at 7:48 p.m. So a couple difficult aspects in the beginning of the day, moving into something energizing in the evening. Now, we have a number of fixed stars happening on Friday, the 20th. The Mercury will be moving off of ALPHECCA and eventually coming into a conjunction with ZUBEN ELGENUBI. 1 second. Yeah, that doesn't happen until Saturday, so we'll wait for that one. But what we are seeing is at 29 degrees of Scorpio, okay, and the orbs of these fixed stars are kind of wide. We will see the sun conjoin the fixed star TOLIMAN, or I believe this is the alpha star in Centaurus or Centauri. I don't know, however you want to pronounce it. So let's take a look at that. So this is, we'll move forward to the 20th. Here's the sun, and here is the centaur. Okay, and Centaurus, it's also called Rigel Centaurus or Alpha Centaurus, Centaurus. And this is Chiron. We have two centaurs in the sky, Chiron, and I believe this is Crotus, is Sagittarius. And one is more the teacher and more gentle. The other is a little more wild. And Chiron was the gentle teacher, the healer, the musician. Toliman means hereafter. This star was also known as Bungula. And I think that this is we can think about this as the right foot of the centaur, and anything associated with a foot is maybe like a god touching the earth and wisdom being grounded. So this may be a fixed star where we're trying to ground some kind of wisdom. Bernadette Brady talks about seeking to expand your worldview. Also, we can think about Chiron and the Chiron story as a wound that was difficult to heal. I mean, the story goes with Chiron that we have this, I believe he came into contact with one of Hercules' poisoned arrows. And since Chiron was immortal, he didn't die, but he was not able to heal that wound. So he goes through life with this suffering of this wound from Hercules' arrow. Now, this was also a star that marked out the autumnal equinox from 3800 to 2575 BCE. The Egyptians associated it with the god Serket, who was a fertility god or goddess, but also wore a crown of like a scorpion crown. So this was someone who protected from like venom, snake bite. She was called, oh yes, it's a goddess, she who causes the throat to breathe or the throat to contract. So there were alternating significations of have you been stung by the poison of a scorpion, or there was this. Some of this comes from Elizabeth Hazel's good book on fixed stars, a little book of fixed stars, where she speaks about this scorpion um, being a representation of a water scorpion, not necessarily a land scorpion, which I guess would fit with Scorpio, um, where the the way that it moved or the way that it breathed like mimicked like the way that the throat breathes. So there's some interesting symbolism associated with that as far as like something with the breath. So it may be the paralysis of a venomous snake or scorpion bite or sting, or it could be just the breath of life itself. So I think that yeah, this is a fixed star where we are kind of, it's about learning. I think it's about sacrifice. You can see here that Chiron is bringing a sacrifice to the altar. This is Lupus, the wolf right here that it's holding on its sphere. Its spear, yeah. So I guess think about how can we finally move past if we bring in those significations of Scorpio 3. This may be the thing where you're finally gaining wisdom from being able to move past your material desire. What are you going to sacrifice at the altar? What are you going to give up so that you can move forward? What are you going to offer to the gods? What material form are you going to offer to the gods so that you can be infused with divine inspiration again? I think this is part of that sacrifice ethos. It's like kind of like what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to return to the collective so that you can, you know, move forward with manifesting something new. Okay? So think about that as we experience Friday the 20th. All right, let's move back and we're talk about Saturday. On Saturday, November the 21st, we are going to be seeing the moon move from Aquarius to Pisces at 11:05 p.m. So that's actually late in the day. So mostly an Aquarius moon if you're on the East Coast. We will begin our first quarter moon phase. And then Venus will move into Scorpio at 8:21 a.m. and the sun will move into Sagittarius at 3:39 p.m. That's when we see Mercury conjoin ZUBEN ELGENUBI too, if I go forward by just a few hours here, at about 15 degrees of Scorpio. Yeah, we're going to see it applying. Yeah, we're going to get there by the end of the day. So let's break down all of those symbols. All right, so let's start with Venus moving into Scorpio. All right, so this is a face that is double Mars ruled, Chaldean and triplicity method. The tarot card was the Five of Cups, where we see the figure that is mourning the three spilled cups, but there are two cups that are still upright behind him. Book T calls this decan loss and pleasure. Toth calls it disappointment, and Austin Coppock calls it a jawbone. Its associative daimon is the nymphi, who were little spirits of desire. So we could talk about lust, desiring union, desiring, exaggerating sexual or romantic desires. Venus is, of course, in its exile in this particular decan because it's Mars ruled. So we may be trying to create harmony through pursuing something rather than letting it come to us. Also through creating separation. There's, you know, there's some jealousy associated with Venus and Scorpio because you're creating this conflict. You may want to possess something, but you feel like you aren't able to receive it, and yet may cause some internal anger, jealousy, possessiveness. Okay. So try to bring your hunger back into balance. Try to you know, not get too lustful when it comes to the things that you want. Our aesthetics change when Venus changes signs too. So we may be attracted to death. We may be attracted to dark, gothic things with this particular placement. um, it's something where the collective is trying to bring catharsis and artistic expression through this particular channel as well. And this is the channel where we're separating the body from the spirit to return the spirit to the collective and to return the body back to the earth. With Mercury in conjoining Zubin ELGENUBI, remember this was the southern claw or the southern pan of the scales, and they called this insufficient price. So this is where the scale is kind of out of whack. It's out of balance. And it was the southern claw. So anything that's below the ecliptic in the southern, if you have two stars that are pairs and one is in the north and one is in the south, the northern one is generally considered favorable and the southern one is considered harsher. So this one was associated with merciless punishment, paying your dues. Uh, and I would say with its a relationship with Mercury, this may be where we're speaking up about injustices. We may be communicating a difficult verdict or a difficult reality to someone, where we're having to really just come to terms with the reality and saying, this is the reality. Come to terms with it, like move on. like, so, and that may be hard to hear. We may be questioning whether a punishment that we've received is unfair. So you could see people trying to contest what they feel is an unjust punishment. We're seeing this with Donald Trump right now, saying, oh, the election wasn't fair. I'm going to start all these lawsuits and things like that. So that may be something that comes into play. Um, there's usually a planetary essence to a fixed star that we get, I believe, from Ptolemy. And Zubin ELGENUBI is the essence of Jupiter and Mars. So we have some judgment, but it's one that we don't like with Mars, and Zubin ELGENUBI, I believe, was Jupiter and Mercury. I could be wrong on that, but it was a more favorable verdict. We'll have to look at that when we get to Zubin Zubin el-Shamali, I meant, was the more positive star. So the other thing that we're experiencing on Saturday, though, the 21st, is a big change. The sun is moving into Sagittarius, and that happens at 3:39 p.m. So this is a temple that is like Jupiter. Like Jupiter is its host. Okay, so but one distinction that Schmidt made is that you got to think about it like these are just places. They're birth channels, and they like think about it as a house. And this house is like Jupiter. It wants to confirm. It wants to stabilize. It wants to uh, move towards abundance, right? And the tarot card associated with this first decan is the Eight of Wands, which is called swiftness. Uh, uh, Austin Coppock calls this the poisoned arrow. This is all about speed. This face is ruled by Mercury and Jupiter. Now we have to remember that Jupiter is in aversion to the sun now. Jupiter is also in its fall, so not able to get the resources it needs to move forward. So we may have an awareness of a goal that we want to move towards. And this decan is all about moving towards a goal. The daimon associated with it is called loimos, Loimos. And this was a spirit that was associated with pestilence, plague, disease. But there's an interesting meaning that I found when I was looking this up. Loimos means in Greek to become a pest, like to spread, like you could think of it like spreading your beliefs. What does a plague do? It spreads. A plague, Austin Coppock points out that a plague needs a host. So you may be spreading your beliefs, you may be spreading your enthusiasm, or maybe you're spreading your poison. So you have to think about, are the beliefs that you're trying to spread around, is the goal that you're moving towards, is it worthy? And I would highly, highly caution you uh, about moving too quickly towards something while Jupiter is in Capricorn. Now, Jupiter is going to move out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, I believe, by the end of the sun's time in Sagittarius. So just be patient, because you may be able to refine the goal much better when Jupiter isn't like drawing upon this depressed, position. Now, one thing that is clear in Austin's book is that if you don't have a goal, you can become a host for someone else's goal, like you can become a host for a disease. So it's important to try to get clear on what your self-directed goals are. He also talks about the bow and the arrow. In ancient times, there wasn't a centaur with this. It was just a bow and an arrow. And this is true in other cultures too. In Chinese culture, this is associated with the bow and the arrow. And the bow is the vehicle, and the arrow is like what is being carried. Okay, so like our body is the bow, our intention, our where what we're trying to hit with the mark with is the arrow. So be careful that you don't become a vehicle for other people's arrows, because that can be a really thankless position to be in. Really get clear on what your motivation is and what you're trying to move towards. Okay, and you will gain vitality, the sun, and you will gain the satisfaction of awareness, of knowledge, of spiritual knowledge, when you understand what your own spiritually motivated quest is. Now, again, one last warning: the spiritual quest that you think you're on may be motivated by material things with Jupiter in Capricorn. It may be much more motivated by helping the collective once Jupiter moves into Aquarius. Okay. So just be patient. Question whether you're trying to have some sort of selfish goal that is not rooted in your spiritual higher self, but in some sort of pursuit of material. I don't know. Could be pursuit of money. It could be pursuit of resources. It could be pursuit of status. That's one thing to watch out for with Jupiter in the third decan of Capricorn, is you may be pursuing, a position of power that isn't spiritually motivated. It's just motivated by earthly power. Okay. All right. Now, the last thing that's happening on Saturday, the 21st, is the moon is moving into a square position with the sun. Okay. So around very late in the evening, the moon is going to move into Pisces. Okay. Let's just pretend like it's here in Pisces. And it's going to be making a square to the newly ingressed sun in Sagittarius. So we might feel this a little bit more on Sunday. But what are we squaring here? We're squaring motion, action, a goal, with potentially going an external goal, with potentially going off into our imaginations, into our minds, to search out internal meaning. So this may be the point where you're having a little bit of an existential crisis about, what is my goal? What do I really want to do? What does it mean? Does it give me meaning? Okay. It's an existential crisis of faith. Do I really have faith in the goal that I'm pursuing? We're trying to, we may have a desire to escape into the labyrinth of the mind, which is the labyrinth is what Austin Coppock calls the first decan of Pisces. So take some time. Take some time to meditate on the goal. Slow down a little bit. I know that you're going to want to move forward, but take some time to meditate. And if that goal is going to bring meaning into your life, or if it's just a selfishly, materially motivated. All right. Let's finish up with Sunday. All right, on Sunday, let me move my chart forward. Okay, on Sunday, November the 22nd, a couple lunar aspects. Excuse me. The moon will be trining the newly ingressed Venus into Scorpio from Pisces at 0 degrees at 12:42 a.m. and then sextiling Uranus at 7 degrees of Pisces and Taurus at 2:10 p.m. Now, the interesting thing that is occurring on Sunday is Mercury will be moving back under the beams of the sun. And you can see this here. There is a 15-degree arc of separation between Mercury and the sun. And that is when the light or the beams of the sun make Mercury invisible again. So Mercury under the sun's beams is like Mercury has put on the invisibility cloak or has gone back into the underworld to retrieve retrieve a soul or to retrieve some information or to retrieve some kind of something. And he's crossing over the boundary into becoming hidden again. So this may be a time where we're really like hiding away what we're doing. We may become a little bit more secretive about our projects or things like that. And we're preparing for this next Kazemi moment that happens on the 19th of December at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. Now, that's also very close to the day that Jupiter moves into Aquarius. I believe that is the day. And very close to the Jupiter Saturn conjunction that happens a day or two later. All right. So we're preparing for that big reveal at the end of December, okay, where we're shifting that paradigm. This is called the lying hidden phase in Hellenistic astrology. It is a superior conjunction, which means that it's coming from as a morning star. Okay, so it is coming from the superior position in the zodiac, and it is direct in motion. So when we experience the superior conjunction, Mercury is moving really fast. So we may be getting a lot of ideas, and we don't necessarily have to do anything about them yet, but we are getting a lot of things that we might want to do that are going to come together at that Kazemi moment of gnosis and that rebirth again of Mercury. Okay, so try to do your research, let go of the things that you need to let go of, and then you might have the birth of a new mission when Mercury comes back into conjunction with the sun on the 19th. Okay. All right. That's what I've got for this week. Thank you for sticking it out with me here. Looking ahead to next week, the 23rd through the 29th, a lot of Mercury contacts. Mercury will be trining Neptune on the 23rd. It will be conjoining the fixed star ZUBEN El-Shamali on Tuesday, the 24th. It moves into Scorpio 3 on the 25th. Mercury will be conjoining the fixed star Unucal High, the heart of the serpent, on, I believe, Thanksgiving is the 26th. So try not to get any fights with your relatives or have too much passion or too much pumpkin pie. I don't know. On Friday, the 27th, Mercury will make a sextile to Pluto, and Venus will be opposing Uranus. Okay. Neptune will station direct on the 28th of November, and then Mercury will sextile Jupiter on the 28th, and we'll finish off the week with Venus moving into the second decan of Scorpio. Highly, 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 highly encourage you all to pare down your Thanksgiving celebrations. A small group, if you have to get together, consider the possibility of doing a virtual Thanksgiving with folks. You will survive. And I hope that you have a better chance of your loved ones making it through this if we all do our part and maybe give up the idealization or the idealized version of the holiday. I know it's tough. I love Thanksgiving. I love to eat. I love, getting together with people and sharing food. That's a really nice thing. But I think that in this particular circumstance, taking the long view is the smart thing to do. And I hope for all of you that you can find a way to connect with your loved ones while still being safe and protecting your community and your loved ones from a terrible disease. So that's what I've got this week. Thank you all for hanging out with me. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you are wanting to do your part, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and SoundCloud and Facebook and Instagram, Twitter. Hit that like button. Leave me a comment. Let me know how things are going for you and what kind of things you're trying to shed so that something new can be born. If you want to support what I do and the work that I do materially, there are a few donation links with Venmo and with PayPal Me that are shared in the video description. You can also reach out for a reading. That is a great way to support the work that I do and to get some knowledge about your own life and what the stars have in store for you and how you can work together with the planetary deities to create a life that reflects what the cosmos has in mind for you as well. You can work together with the divine, co-create with the divine, so to speak. And that's what I've got. So be good to one another, be patient with the process, and we'll see you the next time. Peace.